So I'm going to get rid of those connectors. And I'm going to drag up another object, and this is a filter object. And all of these different objects that I'm pulling over, I'm getting from my left-hand side. And when I'm done going through this example, I'll take you through some of these in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to start with my feed, my first object in my pipe. I'm going to connect it to that sub-element, which I already showed you. I'm going to connect that sub-element to my filter, and then I'm going to connect my filter to my pipe output. So now what am I doing? I'm taking the items in my feed. I'm stripping them down to just the content of the feed by choosing a sub-element that I know contains that content, item.description. And now I'm going to add a filter that tells Yahoo Pipes, I want you to block items that match all of the following rules. If the item description contains the word Yahoo, I want you to filter it out. And now you will see, if I refresh my pipe output, why didn't that work? Yeah, no, it should work. My mouse batteries are about to die in my mouse. Sometimes it takes, oh here, item content, that was the problem. The filter was looking in the wrong piece of the feed. So it had been looking in item.description. It really needed to be looking in item.content to contain Yahoo. And now if I go to my pipe output, you'll see we've gone from 4 items to 2 because we've basically stripped out the items that don't match a particular criteria that we have. So again, you know, there's no particular reason why I would want that for this particular feed that I've developed, but what it's an example of is the power that you have once you start to add these objects to your pipe. If you have a feed coming in, but it contains information or data that isn't relevant to your purpose, you can strip it out in a number of different ways, and one of the ways you can do that is by simply blocking items in the feed that contain maybe a word or a phrase that isn't relevant, or by only permitting items that match a particular term or phrase. Before I go any further, are there any questions? Is this making sense? And are you able to follow along with the screen sharing? So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of rearrange things a little bit because my workspace is getting cluttered here. I'm going to pull up another element into my Yahoo pipes. And this is sort of I'm going to take out my filter, and I'm going to take out my item description. Actually, yes, this is the one that I want. Okay, so I'm going to take my original feed, and I'm going to connect it to a very special operator that we use in our operator or object, this orange box that we use in Yahoo Pipes. It's called a loop. And loops you can use in a number of different ways, but basically what it allows you to do is loop through each item in your data source, say your RSS feed, and do something with it. You know, for example, for the DS106 site, our feed has something like 600 items in it, representing like the last 600 posts. Well, if I want to do something with each of those posts, I need a programmatic way of working through them. And the loop operator is how I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and connect my feed to this loop. And the way that this works, you'll see I can actually remove this. When I add a loop to a Yahoo pipe, the loop itself doesn't do anything. All it does is loop through each item. But what happens on each of those loops is really up to what you put in the center here, where it says drop module pipe from toolbox here. So in this particular case, the module that I want to add is called a term extractor, which I'm going to add. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get it to take the pipe here. See if I can get it to go back in there. I might have to re-add my loop. Let me try re-adding it. get rid of that. So my loop is over here in my toolbox under operators. I'm going to add my loop. And then under my string category, I have something called term extractor. Okay, so I'm going to drop the term extractor in there. I'm going to hook my original feed up to that. And I'm going to say for each of the, you'll remember that the actual content of each of my items, which was the description of, each item was a question and an answer, and the answer was in the item.description field. I'm going to tell it to loop through each item description for the 4 items in my feed and extract the most important terms that it discovers in there. And this uses an algorithm that Yahoo has developed. You don't really have any control over how that term extraction works. It's not necessarily the most precise thing, but it can do some rather interesting analysis. And I can either emit those as a single item or as a list. I'm going to choose to do it as a single item. And when you run a loop, you have 2 different options about what Yahoo Pipes provides with what it finds. It can either replace your existing feed with a brand new feed, which is when you emit the results, or it can just add a new attribute to your existing feed, which is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to hook that up to my pipe output and see what I get. So I still have my 4 items because I've removed that filter. You remember I had a filter on there before. I took that off. I have my 4 items with my titles, each question. And I'm looking for a new attribute in each of these items called item.loop:"term extractor, and there it is. And if I open it up, I see that I have a content in that item, which is a number of words: programming, tool, remixing, data sources. So it read my short little answer to my question, a programming tool for ingesting, remixing, and publishing data sources, and it decided those were the 4 most important words, and it extracted those for me. And it did that for each of my questions and answers. So for this one, specific services, CSV, Google, Yahoo is the term extraction that it did. So that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't really give me a whole lot. There's not much I can do with that right off, with those terms by themselves. So I'm looking to see if there's something more interesting I can do. Now that Yahoo has told me what's interesting about the text of my feed, what can I do with it? Well, one of the, actually I don't want that one yet. I don't want that one. One of the operators that Yahoo gives you is actually a translation operator. So I'm going to see if I can get Yahoo Pipes to translate those terms for me. So I'm going to hook up my pipe, and I'm going to tell it to, I'm picking the item that got added up here, item.loop:"term extraction content, and I'm going to translate it from English to Spanish. And this time I'm going to emit the results instead of adding them to my feed. I'm basically going to create a whole new feed of those results and see what I get. And hopefully this will work. Yay, okay. And there I have my translation. All right, so what did I just do? You remember this sub-element operator that I showed you at the very beginning, that all it really does is isolate a particular attribute of an item in a feed. And I went back and added that in because it allowed me to kind of simplify the data that I was working with. Instead of having 9 or 10 different attributes that I then had to kind of keep track of, and sometimes Yahoo starts nesting them within each other, this just streamlined my data source. So I have my feed coming in. There's my original feed. Within that feed, I have an attribute called description, which is the content of my item, which was the answer to my question. I have a sub-element that's just isolating that description. And then I'm running that into this loop, which is going to extract the most important terms from my description. And then I'm taking those most important terms and I'm running them through another loop, which is going to translate all of them from English to Spanish. So I can open this up now, and each For each of my 4 questions, I have extracted the most important terms, and Yahoo has now translated them into Spanish. I don't know how well it has done with that translation, but it has done something with it.